Hey folks, Grant from the Ethical Predator, and I'm going to be, as I promised, answering your questions that I've gotten from folks all over the world, actually. I'm completely flattered, and thank you for the support. The most common question I get asked about is, with regards to my setup, bow weights. What is my opinion on bow weights? Well, that's a real loaded question, right? And I'm going to answer it like this. I was taught to shoot the heaviest weight that you can manage. Now, let's dive into that a little bit. For some folks, manage means being able to pull the string back and let an arrow go. For me, manage means I can shoot that bow consistently, accurately, in the hunting conditions I'm going to be hunting in. Let me explain that a little bit. If I'm hunting locally, 99% of the time, I am heading out into the woods. I'm sitting for 3 hours at a time, 3 to 4 hours at a time, or maybe I'm doing an all-day sit. But I'm still coming home to a warm vehicle and a warm house, warm residence. Why am I breaking it down this way? There's a difference between that and a do-it-yourself hunter who's going off with a couple other guys, or maybe on his own, or gals, or maybe on his own, or her own, and they're coming back and they're having to warm themselves up, and through a period of anywhere from like 2 to 5 days, you're going to be in an environment that's going to be much more challenging than coming home to a warm home and getting your head around going back out again the next day and hunting. How does this all evolve into a hunting weight bow? It's going to be harder under extreme conditions to consistently draw and shoot that bow, right? If I'm out in the wilderness for a week, I want a bow I can shoot all week. When I'm a little bit colder, a little more uncomfortable likely, and I'm probably active all day. I'm using all my, kinetic and kinesthetic energy and caloric, input and output, of course, in that environment as well. Especially things like helping other folks recover game or getting into places where game is, which sometimes takes a little bit of boots on the ground. That environment, I want to have a bow that I can manage. So what I do, my average weight of bow I shoot is between 54 and 60 pounds. I still shoot my 62 pounds at my draw length, semi-custom Damon Howard Hunter. And my primarily go-to bow in the last few years has been this vintage 1972 Damon Howard High Speed. Why? Well, it gives me a bit of a balance, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But with regards to the bow weight, not only is it a good shooter for me, it's very forgiving. I can come back and even make a couple little errors once in a while when I'm not, overthinking a little bit sometimes, which happens with everyone. But it's forgiving, and I shoot it consistently really well. It's 54 pounds at my draw length. So it shoots a nice heavy arrow as well, almost 600 grains with the broadhead, and the arrows fly like darts. Now, let's get into the weight thing a little bit again. Some folks go out and they're going to go out, and say, hey, there's no weight restrictions in my state. I'm going to shoot a 35-pound bow. That's fine. Just a couple of caveats to that. Arrow placement is definitely the number one thing. And I'm going to say that, a lot of my buddies who shoot really heavy bows will say, well, the heavier the better. It's true. I believe in that too, but there needs to be a little bit of a balance struck. Here in Ontario, for instance, we require 39.7 pounds at a certain amount of draw length. Now, this is important. Hear me out here. One of the problems we get into is that people sometimes make less than ideal shots. It happens. That's it. One of the things that the entire focus on the Ethical Predator is actually about, right? Remember, I follow 3 codes, the Code of Traditional Archery. And this is from my book. The first one is weapons proficiency with a stick bow. And I'm going to start breaking that down a little bit in future videos. But for this one, when it comes to draw weight, I'm going to go back to what I said before. Apart from the environments and the conditions you may be hunting under, I want something that is consistent across the board for me. Something that is comfortable enough for me to draw and shoot all year round under adverse conditions, unsanitized conditions. And what I mean by that is it's not inside a nice warm 3D range in the winter or out in the sunny June, July, August afternoon. There's no rain. I'm not encumbered by certain kit I'm wearing to be able to actually exist out there and hunt effectively as well. These are really important considerations when picking your bow weight. For new people just starting out, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're just starting out, if you're switching over from a wheel bow, you're going to do two things from a wheel bow, for instance, right away. You're going to notice your draw length is going to shorten, sometimes by up to 2 inches. I've seen people draw length shorten. Usually it's about a half an inch or so. The second thing is you're going to have to drop down in weight because you're not hitting the valley and there's no let off occurring. The bow is getting harder and harder to pull as you hit your draw length, depending on the style of the bow, the design, of course, and the bow itself, recurve or longbow. So these are all little important things you need to kind of factor in when choosing and making your decision. Now, what I like to do is recommend somebody start off with a bow that's not going to break their bank and that they're going to be able to shoot and manage. And I recommend 35 pounds. Why? It's really simple. It's not far off from most requirements under state and provincial legislation, fish and wildlife laws. It's not 5 pounds, 10 pounds is not much more of a jump. It also teaches people to have really good form and structure without feeling like after, a dozen arrows that they're really struggling to get that string back to anchor, okay? I had a buddy of mine years ago, I've talked about it in my book, that bought an incredible, it was a PSA Black Widow, I believe, custom. That bow cost him, by the time he got to Canada, around $1,800, shipping included, everything, with arrows and the whole thing outfitted for him. Now, just bear with me a minute. The bow was 55 pounds. He had come from a wheel bow where he's shooting a 75-pound wheel bow, and he's like, oh, I've gone down enough in weight, 25 pounds or more, I'm going to be fine. The problem is that he could shoot it accurately about 3 times. He could shoot it 6 or 7 more times before, kinetically and kinesthetically start failing, right? This is a huge problem. So, I said to him, dude, you're going to have a problem when you're sitting there 3 or 4 hours in the cold trying to get that shot off accurately. And what's going to happen is you're going to invent target panic for yourself. You're going to create it, in other words. So what you need to do is drop down. I went inside, got a lighter weight bow, 45-pound bow. It was actually probably about 42 pounds at his draw length. And I said, you can borrow this. It was an older Damon Howard hunter I had. And he took off with it and he shot it all summer. I coached him all summer. And he came back and shot a deer with that bow that fall, gave it back to me, and had a second tag and shot a doe with it 2 weeks later with his Black Widow, actually. My point is, he needed to build up to that. And he was a big guy. He was 6'2", about 245, and he was with a Tier 1 military unit here in Ontario, Canada, and very fit. But he was not conditioned to that platform, which is a stick bow, okay? That's just an example of building up to something. You need to understand this is a process, not a product. And if you can do that, you're going to have a heck of a lot more fun shooting these bows. The struggle stick mentality, as I said in other videos, you got to wipe that out. You got to wipe that out. As soon as you put a label like that on any weapons platform, I don't care anything, you're going to have problems. When you drive a vehicle, we don't call them struggle cars, right? I know this sounds pretty inane. I know wing shooters that are trap shooters, they don't call their shotguns struggle shotguns. As soon as you put a label on anything or a negative slant on it, that is going to infect everything you do, and it's going to become an excuse for missing. Remember what I said before. The most important thing is, and this goes with finding a good weight for you to shoot. Remember something. The best shots in the world miss. The best in the world miss. It's okay to miss. You got to focus on what you did right, not when you're doing it wrong. This is super critical, right? It's that half empty, half full idea. You've really got to keep an open mind and be teachable. And guess what the most teachable part is? And I'll get into this in another video. Your arrows. Your arrows are your best coach. They really are. In my shooting system that I teach folks, I teach people to let their arrow coach them and to read what the arrow's doing. 9 times out of 10, people can self-assess. After a couple of months with me, they're off to the races. I hope that helps answer your question about bow weight. Again, correct placement on an animal into the vitals with a sharp broadhead is essential. I prefer to tell people to shoot the heaviest weight you can manage under the conditions and presets I've already gone off and mentioned and ranted about in the last 10 minutes of this video. But it's important that you find what works for you, right? This is something that's super critical. Too often we get shoved down our throats about what works for other people. The cool thing about shooting a stick bow more than any other archery platform is that it becomes so individual that, you know, other people's input will help. But after you develop that good foundation, and that's what I like to do for people, I give them a great foundation and I let them build their own house. And that's what I recommend you do as well. Start off with a weight you can manage under conditions you're going to hunt in and have fun. Until next time, keep the questions coming, and I hope that helps some folks out.